Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another segment of Seed Time and Harvest, where I'll be giving you some practical steps on how to grow your food where you are. So, Jose, the last time we were here, what did we talk about?
Last week we talked about pesticides and how to control the pest organically without using chemicals, and that way you can have a healthy garden.
Right, that's right. And we looked at how to make a garlic oil pest control solution, as well as a spicy mixture for critters, for biting insects. And so many people will think that, okay, there are certain time to plant. So today, what are we going to be focusing on?
So today we're going to talk about what to plant, when to plant, and where to plant.
Right.
You know, when we look at the Bible principles of even found in Ecclesiastes, if we look at our screen here, all right, there we are. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 tells us, "To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven." So here we learn the principles of knowing when it is to sow the seed time, and then also your harvest time. So we have seed time and harvest time. Everything has a season.
Yes, that's true. And that goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier. Many people think that, okay, you can only plant in the springtime or fall time. And there are certain things that you can plant in that time because you don't have as many critters. So your leafy greens or your winter greens will do better in the fall and in early spring so that they will be freed from those biting insects. But there are things that we can plant in the summer as well, and that will lead us to the two categories of seasons for when to plant.
Now, before we go there, Charisse, we also want to keep in mind that when you are considering what to plant, you want to remember that you want to plant the things that you eat.
True, that makes
because
sense.
you wouldn't want to plant, let's say, mustard greens if you don't like them because they're bitter.
Exactly.
So you want to consider what is it that your household is eating and what is it that is accumulating most of the money, the expensive things that you're buying.
Right.
These are the things that you want to think about what to plant when you are considering what to plant.
And then the space that you have available too, because as you mentioned, mustards are big producers and they're heavy producers. So if you have 4 persons in your whole household, you don't want to plant 12 mustard plants because that's going to take up a lot of space, a lot of energy and resources that you could need to plant something else. So what you plant depends on the need of your family and the space that you have available.
That's right.
Also, you can plant things together to reduce the need to make natural pest control, right?
Yes, very interesting point. And with that point, then we also talk about what are combative versus companion gardening.
Yes.
And first of all, let's talk about the things that are combative. You know, if you have a plant that enjoys a lot of water, you wouldn't want to plant that next to a variety of plants that doesn't want that much water. Because then you'll be working at odds. Also, you want to consider what is combative with each other. Here we have a list in this slide of things that are combative as well as things that are compatible. Now, combative plants do not do well together. And we have here the beans and your garlic. Also, if you look down, here you will see your tomatoes that don't do well with potatoes.
Right.
These are things that are combative. And then we also have things that are companions.
That grows well together.
Right.
So your companion may be like your basil and your tomato with your marigold. Because your tomatoes, hornworms are attracted to your tomatoes, but they're also attracted to your marigold. So if you plant your marigold around your tomato plants, then they will less likely to get attacked.
Right. Now, before we go into that next slide, you know, I want to just make sure I have everybody's attention on that link there. You can see and go to that link to get that chart so that you know what to plant together and what not to plant together.
Yes. So if someone may have planted a garden last year and that they had a failure, per se, in their garden because they just threw things together, maybe their first time, so they're just trying to see, okay, what are we growing? Well, you may be planting things that are combative, and that's why you may not have a good success with your garden. So if you go to this chart, you will be able to plan your garden so that you will have a productive season.
That's right. And so in our next slide here, we have exactly what you were just mentioning, those things that do well together, such as your tomato
Tomatoes.
and your marigold.
Right.
As well as your basil. We have experience with that. Why don't you tell them about that?
Well, we planted a basil we had like 2 or 3 tomatoes last year, and we had a tomato forest. It was very productive. We had very little pests, no hornworms, and we just had a lot of basil. I mean, we made basil bouquets. And we had a lot of tomatoes because they did well together.
We were giving away basil.
Yes, yes. And we even have tomato sauce now left over from our last year's tomato harvest.
We have about 3.
We have 3 quarts.
3 quarts
tomato
left,
sauce left. And that just to show the production you can get when you plant things that are companion.
Right. And here we have in this slide the marigold, which will attract the tomato hornworm, so that instead of eating your tomato, it will eat the marigold flowers.
Right. And it's like a barrier to prevent the bugs from getting to the good stuff.
That's true.
Yes. And so another excellent companion garden is a 3-sister method. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, if you look at the next slide here, we can see that we have the corn, the beans, and the squash. And the way that they work together, we have the beans that will go up the stalk of that corn.
As a trellis.
Yes, so it will serve as a trellis for the corn as support,
for
the bean as support off of the corn. And also the bean will give off nitrogen, release nitrogen into the soil for the corn and the squash.
Right.
And then the squash will serve as a ground cover for all 3. And so we have a perfect relationship. This was actually introduced to the Pilgrims when they came over by the Native Americans.
Okay.
And so this is also known as the
3-sister garden.
That's right.
3-sister garden, and it's very productive, as you mentioned. And having a successful garden takes planning. Now here you may be wondering, okay, why do we have albums here? We plan our garden so that you know exactly what plants plant at which period, keep track of how many seeds you have, and just to know what you have in your catalog. So here we have our album or seed packet by alphabetical order, and everything, all the seeds that we have, we put them in here, and it's good for storage so you don't lose track of your seeds, because you want to make sure they're in a safe place where they're not getting too much light or being exposed to moisture.
You know, I remember many times you asking me if we had a certain seed, and I had no idea, you had no idea, and we didn't know. We bought it and found out, oh wait, we did have it here in this cabinet, hidden away.
Yes, so this is a good way, and you can organize by alphabetical order. You can organize by seasons, which we're going to go next, because how many seasons do we have, or how many categories do we have for planting seasons?
Well, when it comes to plants, we can categorize them into 2, and that is the cool-loving plants and the warm-loving plants.
Okay.
And so we have those that are cool-loving are the ones that enjoy the cool weather, and those would be planted in your spring and fall. As you can see in this slide here, we have the vegetables that do love the cool weather. The ones that love the warm season, when should those be planted?
Well, those are your summer crops. You start those in spring for a light spring and a summer harvest. And your cool vegetables can be your hardy or your semi-hardy. Hardy meaning that they will tolerate a hard frost, generally between 25 to 28 degrees. And what are some of our hardy vegetables?
Right, as we see in the slide here, we see that we have broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, collards, kale, leeks, radish, and spinach, which are the hardy types of vegetables. They will tolerate, as you said, the hard frost between 25 to 28 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes.
And now here we have, what is this that you have
here? Well,
here?
this is a Malabar spinach, and this is a variety of spinach that's a perennial. The beauty about this spinach is you can see the leaves. They are very juicy, broad, and unlike the regular Bloomdale spinach or your Catalina spinach, these will tolerate both a hard freeze and the summer heat.
Yes.
They love the heat of the summer, which is when they will be most productive. These are vine spinach, and if you want to plant a garden where you don't have a lot of time to give to your plants, as well as you want to be able to enjoy harvest throughout the winter, then this would be the variety of spinach that you would plant.
So this hardy plant actually will tolerate the summer very well, and it will it will keep flourishing season in and out.
Yes.
Now, one thing I'd like to mention also for those of us who are in the colder regions, they have a smaller growing season because the winters
winter
are
is so
so
long.
cold. And so we understand that the hardy plants, once it gets to about 25 degrees, you can start planting your hardy plants. But you can also plant indoors, right?
Right.
And
You can
prepare for the growing season.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And for your fall and spring, fall, winter through spring crops, if you want to have those to be successful throughout the winter, because of course, with the cold, with the snow, your plants are going to be stressed. So it would be advised to plant those mid-August to September so your plants have a good root system developed, because that's the key. Once you have a good, healthy root system, then they will be able to keep your plants throughout that harsh period.
Right. So what we want to do is we want to extend our growing seasons.
Yes.
Now for our semi-hardy plants, we have those that tolerate temperatures between 29 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And examples of those are beets, carrots, cauliflower, celery, lettuce, and Swiss chards.
Yes.
We also have artichokes.
Right. Here
Artichokes, correct?
Artichoke. This is a small plant of artichoke, which is a productive semi-hardy plant. If you're in an area where you get foggy summer, mostly in the western states, artichokes are excellent for planting. Why? Because they will produce even in a mild winter setting. So these are good.
Yes, artichokes are a beautiful looking plant
yes,
also.
They are.
And these, as we mentioned, are semi-hardy. All right. And so now let's move over to our summer crops. Now our summer crops are, why are they called such?
Well, these are the plants that will tolerate heat or temperature between 65 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And there are a wide range of summer crops, from your beans to your corn, your peppers, cucumbers, eggplants, melons, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, and a wide variety of things that can be planted in summer. A lot of time people may be discouraged from planting things in summer. Why? Because the critters are out. But as we mentioned before, if you do the companion garden, you'll have a more successful harvest.
And what do we have here? What is
here
this?
we have our pepper. This is a habanero variety of a pepper. And what's the history behind this plant, Jose?
Well, this plant here we've had for a few years now, and we've seen it die and come back each year because it gets cold where we are. And so it will die, but it will come back. So what we would want to do this year is we want to try and overwinter it, as we've shown you in the previous videos.
Yes.
Also, this is as you mentioned, a habanero variety. And so we use this same pepper in our pepper spray.
Right.
For the bugs.
For biting insect. If you want to control biting insect, you want that spicy solution to keep them away.
So this is a summer crop, and this one enjoys the warm weather. Another different type of summer crop is our tomatoes. And I know you're familiar with tomatoes because we've been dealing with tomatoes since the beginning.
Yes.
Here we have a different variety of tomatoes.
And with this variety of tomato, these of course are your summer crops, and they will be high producers throughout the season. They love the summer heat. And here we have two tomato plants that the same exact variety. I believe these are your Burgundy wine tomatoes. We have two plants planted the same exact time, but you can tell the difference. Here, this one is looks very vigorous. It's growing very well. We remove the lower leaves because, of course, we talk about removing the lower leaves from the plants to prevent water from splashing, as well as to prevent bugs from discovering the plant. Now, the difference between the two, here you have one that's a lot more vigorous. You have a lot more blossoms on here, and you even have a tomato coming up. Now, when this plant puts out more tomato, we're going to take off a lot more leaves so that it gets full sunshine for the tomatoes to be able to ripen. And why is there such a big difference between these two plants?
Well, as you can see, if you can, the pot size is what makes the difference.
Yes.
So here we have a smaller pot versus the larger pot. And the larger pot would blossom more and it would have more girth to it, more form and a larger increase of productivity. So this is the major difference. In fact, if we were to put this same tomato in some fertile soil in the ground, it would probably even do even better
right.
than this.
So that goes back to what we talked about in our previous videos. The tomato needs space for the root to go bigger. So the bigger the container, the more productive of the plant that you will have. All right?
That's right.
So this was an excellent.
So this is another variety of summer crops here.
Right.
And so we talked about what to plant. We talked about when to plant it. Now let's deal with where.
Okay.
Where to plant.
So where you plant your vegetables all depends, again, on the space that you have available. Whether you have a big backyard, you only have your indoor, or you have a porch.
That's true.
So it depends on the space that you have. Bear in mind that you want to keep away from planting things under trees, especially mature trees. You can't plant things that...
Why is that though?
Well, because of course the roots of the trees may choke out your plants. Second thing is they may get too much shade, so they may not be as productive. Then you're going to have competition for water. You're going to have competition for nutrients.
And we learned that the hard way,
Yes,
didn't we?
because we planted a few of our raised beds directly, especially pine and oak trees. These are very, what do you call those, intrusive trees, if that's a good word to use to describe them, because they will go in and they will take nutrients from wherever they can. The roots will even come out of the ground and go under your pots. So it's like you have a hard time moving pots that are planted under trees as well. So if you're going to plant anything under trees, you want to make sure that it doesn't mind having competition from roots, losing moisture or sunshine, and any of these things. So just bear in mind what you're planting as well, because
Now,
of
Cerise,
course,
as you mentioned that, it just reminds me of our experience that we had with our blackberries that we placed underneath the tree, and then when we moved them over, just maybe I would say 50 feet away,
yeah,
the difference was night and day.
yes.
In fact, it still hasn't produced any berries.
The ones that are under the tree are really, really small compared to the ones that we move further away. They're big and they're vibrant and they're loaded
Night and
with
day.
berries.
Night
Yes.
and
So
day.
you just want to make sure you know, because there are some plants that do like partial shade. So just know your plants, know your location, and determine then where you're going to plant it. As well as space, Jose. How can we determine how much space is needed per plant?
Well, it would depend on the amount of root space that it needs. So, or also even when it's fruiting, it also needs space then. So
Yes.
our tomatoes would probably want more space than if you would have some herbs,
Right.
which you can plant closer together.
Right.
So it would all depend on the variety. And so
Correct.
as we look at our slide here, it will tell us how much space they would need. So we have our carrots, which you can see there that are planted very close together in this picture.
So
Now,
wait,
what is this diagram?
I was just about to ask you that. This diagram is a square foot garden. And many of you may be familiar with a square foot garden, and that's where you get the most out of your planting space. And before we get to that, there is one thing that we forgot to mention that will benefit both for summer crops and for winter crops, because here in Florida now we have our summer temperatures, not even summer yet, and we're already getting 97, 96 degree temperatures, and sometimes it goes in the hundreds.
Right.
So your plants need protection because not everything will tolerate that extreme heat. So here we just have a simple frame with some 2x4 and some PVC. And what are we going to do with this, Jose?
So this can be likened onto a raised bed that you can have in your garden, or if you would like, if you don't have that garden space, maybe you have a patio space, somewhere where you can put a small raised bed. And so the dimensions of this raised bed would all be determined based upon the space
Space
that you have.
available.
So here we have, this is just a for show, to show you what we are talking about. This is a raised bed that has a hoop house here. We have a PVC that we bent into this U-shaped, and over here, what is the reason for this hoop house?
Well, we're going to have some plants. For example, you have some cool season plants that you want to see if you can get the most out of them as the summer progresses. And so they're not going to tolerate the extreme heat. So with this, what we're going to do, and it's small, but you can make it to the size of the bed that you have or your planting area. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a shade cloth and we're going to put it over this structure to give some shade to our plants, right? And of course, you want to make sure that when you put your shade cloth over it, you put some rocks on each side to prevent it from caving in if it's supposed to rain, or to prevent it from blow away if it gets extremely windy. So this is an excellent structure. It's very simple, very inexpensive. All you need is 3 pieces of PVC and some zip ties to be able to put this in, and then you can move it out as needed. Now, can this only be used for summer?
No, the advantages of a hoop house can be used also in the winter, where you can make this into a greenhouse. You can use a clear plastic that you can put over it, and that would protect it from the sun, or it would protect it from the snow, and it would give a greenhouse effect into your growing area. And so it would provide some heat that would be well needed during the cold days.
Right, so just an extra protection for your plants. And as going back to the slide, if you see here, we have a square foot garden. Yes, thank you. A square foot garden. So you're going to make your square foot planter or your garden based on the size of the space that you have available. The only thing you will need is a piece of string, or many people have used little pieces of or strips of wood. So you're just going to get your box, you're going to measure out each square foot, and then you're going to just use a string to mark out the growing area. And once you have all your square foot sectioned off, then it will determine how much plants you can put in per square foot. Okay, so we're looking at this chart here, and we see for carrots, you can have 16 carrots per square foot. If you're going to do watermelon or anything that vines, of course, you want to put those at the end of your bed, and you want to put 1 melon or 2 melons for each square foot. For tomatoes, you can put 4 tomatoes in a square foot. You know, different things like cabbage or collards or kale, you want to do 2 or 3 plants, and that will maximize your growing space. If you have very little space, we would recommend having a square foot garden, because again, you can plant so many things. And when you do this, you want to make sure that you plant the bigger plants or longer plants, taller plants towards the north. And why is this, Jose?
Well, the reason why you plant them towards the north is because what will happen is that if you don't, then it'll block the sun rays from the other plants. So that's the reason that we do that.
All right, and so here we have our bed sectioned out, and we have 6 planting spaces. And we can do so much in each of these spaces. Again, you can make it, scale it to the size of the area that you have available, and just make the most of whatever planting space that you have.
That's right. And so there you have it. Where to plant, what to plant, when to plant. We covered all these 3. I hope that you've been helped by these topics that we've been covering, and we also hope that you are able to put them into practice.
All right, and happy planting, everyone.
Happy planting.